Welcome to the Heavy Duty Hub podcast, brought to you by KEA Advisors. KEA Advisors, transforming commercial dealerships to drive real profit. I'm Jeremy and this is Chris, and this is the inaugural episode of the Heavy Duty podcast. Welcome and glad you could join us. Chris, this podcast has been a long time in the making and we're finally here. I can't believe we're finally doing this.
Yes, you are right, 100%. It has been a long time in the making, but we are here, and I'm excited and ready to go.
Yep, me too. Well, we thought we'd start by giving you some insight into who we are, what our backgrounds are, and why we decided to do this, and then give you an idea of what our vision is for this podcast going forward. So we'll start with you, Chris. Well, how long have you been in the industry? And what initially got you into the industry?
Well, I'll even start. My name is Chris Norris. I have been in this industry now for over 20 years, which is hard to believe and fathom, to be quite honest with you. I started way back in heavy equipment over 20 years ago. It's more specifically in the mining area and arena, and then found my way into the parts world in the dealership. And I have done pretty much every job you can do in a parts department, especially on a management level. I've been a parts manager, parts director, an assistant parts director, if there is even such a thing. But definitely it's been a great ride, and I'm so happy to be here just to hopefully share some of the experiences I've had and made over the years with a lot of people that are out there. What about you?
So for me, I'm just starting my 36th year. Actually started when I was 17 into the dealership world. And it's a pretty funny story of how I got started. I was working at a place called the Auto Mall, and I'm 17 years old. I'm 3 weeks away from getting married. And yes, getting married at 17. I've been working full time since I was 14. I'm 3 weeks away from getting married, and the company I'm working for, Friday morning, we were supposed to get our checks, and checks didn't show up. So about lunchtime, checks still aren't there. Finally, about 3 o'clock that afternoon, here comes a bunch of police officers, and they want to shut the building down because apparently the owner had absconded with all the money and resources from the company. He had taken off. So, of course, you've got a bunch of mechanics who are not going to allow that to happen because all of our tools, our toolboxes, everything were in there. So it was a big dust up, and the news ended up showing up there. We ended up getting all of our stuff out of the building, but I was interviewed on the news that night. And about midnight that night, I get a call at my house from the dealer principal. And he said, "Hey, I just saw you on the news, heard about your situation. You have a job. Be here at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning." So I showed up at 8 o'clock, and that's when I started. And my career path has been just crazy. So it was a Wednesday or a Thursday, and I started as a driver. It was the only position they had open, but I needed the money. I had to do it. So I started as a driver, and the warehouse manager, he had gone away for a retreat that weekend. Well, needless to say, it was probably a retreat that nobody would ever want to be on. And when he came back from that retreat, his thoughts and ideology were not aligned with the company. And they fired him on the spot when he returned. And the owner turned around, looked at me, and said, "You're the new warehouse manager."
So what you're saying is he went on a singles retreat and came back.
It was so much worse than a singles retreat.
I can imagine.
Yeah, that's definitely not a story for the podcast, that's for sure. But yeah, so he gets fired. They promote me to warehouse manager. I've only been there 2-3 days. So fast forward about a week and a half, and the back counter guy breaks his leg. So now they put me at the back counter. Fast forward another week or two. The front counter guy who was into RC race cars, he fell as he was carrying his car to the truck. And when he fell, he didn't want to let go of the car. It broke both his elbows. So I went from driver to warehouse manager to back counter to front counter, all within about 30 to 60-day time span.
If that isn't fate, I don't know what would be. That's almost like a Final Destination type thing, but no one died, thank goodness.
Exactly.
But man, you talk about your fate and just kind of moving forward in a rapid pace. But ironically enough, I think that's how a lot of people, not to that extreme, but you kind of start in one role, and next thing you know, you're next man up or next person up, and you're out there, and you've got to go. It's kind of crazy.
It's funny because anytime we do an engagement, I always ask that question: how did you get into the industry? And with the exception of technicians, because technicians usually they go to school to be a technician, right? They go to a college or a trade school to learn the skill. I've never yet met anybody who's a truck salesperson or a parts person in a dealership where that's what they wanted to do. That was their career choice. Everybody seems to have fallen into it some way or somehow. And it's so interesting to hear all the different stories of how they came to be in this industry.
Yeah, I have to thank Kenny for mine, so I'll blame him. But it is kind of crazy, No one I've not met. I think I've met one or two people over all the years that one of their parents worked in the dealership, and they just came into it that way. But pretty much, it's always like they knew somebody, or it's completely kind of by accident, and it's fascinating when you think about
it. Yeah, that's kind of crazy. So, as you were coming up and as you were going along in your career, who were some of your mentors along the way?
Well, this is a tough one. I've had so many coming up through the years. My first mentor, really going back, was in a church I attended as a young person. He was kind of like a big brother to me, and just really taught me about what the importance of a work ethic was and what was involved in that and what went into it. And then, at a very young age, I started kind of from that. I think I did landscaping and cut grass, but moving forward in my career and not kissing up, but you actually were a big part of mentoring me in my role in the dealership world. And, I took a lot from what you really taught me, and just over the years of being able to apply that into what I've done since. And then one other was a gentleman, I'll call him a seasoned senior gentleman at one of the dealerships I worked for. And man, he was just a great mentor, and he mentored in a way you didn't realize he was mentoring, which I think is one of the best things, but it's just one of those things that you're going through it and he'll make a suggestion or say, hey, have you ever thought about it this way? And it's like, no, I never did. And then it's like, oh, that was what he was talking about. So those are kind of my big three. I don't know about you. What were yours?
Well, first, just back it up a little bit. Thank you for the compliment. And it was funny because we've worked together three different places now, so we've been together for a long time, known each other for a long time. But when you were initially hired, I went against everything I believed in when I hired you. I always had the philosophy of I can't hire in a manager who's never done the job of the people he's managing. And it's something that I felt strongly about. But in this instance, I'd been through so many people and nobody could handle it. It was just a big dealership. It was a monster to control. So I said, I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm just going to hire somebody who's got managing skills. I can teach them the parts world. I need a manager. And worked out pretty well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I guess I know a lot of people that have worked for me over the years might question the managing skill part, but no, I really appreciate that. It did work out. And who'd think that, 15 plus years later, we'd be sitting here now on our third place we'd work together as well. Now we're doing a podcast, which is kind of crazy.
It's great.
So, yeah, I'm excited.
So, my mentors along the way, the first one I had was a gentleman named Bob Schmidt. And it was right when I started at the dealership, 17 years old. And he really walked me through the parts business. Taught me a lot, taught me how to look at things differently. And I always had a knack for just memorizing part numbers. I don't know why. I can't remember your name when you walk out of the room, but I remember a part number forever. And, so he taught me a lot. And then later in my career, I met a gentleman who I think is the one you were referring to. His name, Mr. Baldwin.
That's him.
Mr. Baldwin. He, like you said, he just had a way about him. And he would come in and we'd talk and he'd tell me a story. And the story would be fascinating. You'd be hanging on every word he said. But then later that night, you'd be at home and either eating dinner or laying in bed, and all of a sudden it would hit you. Oh, wait a minute. He told me that story because he needs me to do this or to do that or to change this or look at something differently. So his way of teaching and getting you to do things or motivating you was so unique. And he was just such a down to earth, cut and dry person. I mean, he didn't coddle you at all. It's black and white. It is what it is. And then later in my career, I met Keith Ely, and I've known Keith Ely for a long time. And back in 2017, I had the privilege of going through the Dealer Academy, which is a 6-week long intensive course that teaches you everything dealership from accounting all the way through to ownership. And Keith was the one who taught a lot of those classes, and I really got a different perspective and a different view of Keith. And when I got home from those classes, I told my wife, I said, this is what I want to do. I want to teach. I want to get into this industry. I love the industry, absolutely love it. But I want to teach. I think I can do that. So, and it's funny because as you can see on the shirt, the KEA Advisors, KEA Advisors is sponsoring this podcast. And that's who we're working for now is Mr. Keith Ely. So that's the third person I can think of as far as a mentor. So just out of curiosity, what was your reason for wanting to start this podcast?
Well, for me, the biggest thing was just I love podcasts first and foremost, whether it's comedy, but I always try to get something out of them or something relative to what I like my hobbies are, tinkering with things. And, I kept looking around and there was nothing I could really find that was in the dealership world or space that there was really no data about anything that goes on in a dealership out there. So for me, it just seemed like a glaring void that, I love to talk about it. Parts is my life. It's been my life for a long time. But I also really wanted to have a voice in that space that people have a platform that they can go to and ask questions and talk about. And I think, that's what we can bring to this, especially in our roles with what we do now at KEA Advisors. It really it ties together because of what we do. I'm a professional advisor. I specialize in parts. You dabble in that as well and some other things too. So, I mean, it's just, we cover pretty much every aspect of a dealership. It doesn't matter whether it's sales, service, parts, accounting. We cover everything and we can really help dealers kind of drive whatever they're looking to do. And if they're struggling with something, we have a combined, I can't even tell you, it's 1,500 years of experience amongst our group. And what we can do to help dealers is just immense. So that's the exciting thing, about kind of with what we do and what I like to do and kind of what I hope to gain from having this space is just have a good collaborative space that people can come to and get something from, walk away with something that will help them in their role tomorrow.
Right. That's, for me too, what I wanted is there are a few other avenues out there. There's some websites, there's some chat groups, but they're all very specific to, the service department, the parts department. When we first started kicking this around, I really wanted to bring in the whole industry. We call it the Heavy Duty Hub, the Heavy Duty Hub podcast. We're not just truck dealer. We're not just trailer dealer. We're not, OEM specific. It's the industry. And I want to bring in all kinds of industry people. I'm talking manufacturers reps, dealer personnel, industry experts, all the different people to help discuss the different topics. And we want to open it up to where you can put in whatever you'd like to put in. Give us some suggestions. What do you want to talk about? What's something that's been plaguing you or bothering you? Or maybe something you've always wanted to ask but haven't been able to get a good answer. Send it in to us and we'll see what we can do. And we'll get it on one of the podcasts in the future.
Yeah, that's the exciting thing is that, going into this, we obviously have a plan, but it's the unknown. What is our audience and our participants going to ask from us to talk about and bring to the table? And that's the exciting thing for me, is to see where we can take this and how far we can go with it.
Right. And hopefully this is our inaugural podcast. There'll be many more to come. We're going to try and do at least one a month. We might be able to get 2 out. Depends on how our schedules are because we're constantly traveling. But in the meantime, displayed on the screen, you'll see that there's 2 different websites you can go to check out. One is the heavydutyhub.net, and that'll be where this podcast is housed. It'll also be housed on keadvisors.com. That's keaadvisors.com. And then if you have any questions, if you want something answered, if you want us to talk about something specific on the podcast, you can go to info@keaadvisors.com or the heavydutypod@gmail.com. So any one of those ways you can get in touch with us to give us some ideas and something to think about. And hopefully this thing will take off and we'll be able to talk to you much more and be part of your everyday life.
Yeah, we'll give you something to watch while you're having your coffee, at least, right?
At least. And who knows, sometimes we'll break off into something different. I know we're both big sports geeks, so I'm sure we'll throw a few sports things in here once in a while and some other topics, but primarily we're going to stick to the heavy duty world, and hopefully we'll be seeing everybody soon. Thank you very much for tuning in. And, we look forward to continuing the podcast.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Can't wait to see what is next and what questions you have and topics for us. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.